yeah, if you wait for something, it blocks, of course. And yeah, another thing that will make real-time programming a little bit more comfortable. You have a user kernel space communication, because RTI, the tasks, as I've mentioned before, are placed in kernel mode. That's good on one hand, and you have a libc, a specialized libc, that life is a little bit easier there. But most of the time you just want to do a specific task in real time and make the rest of the calculation, the rest of the presentation or whatever in user space. And there you can use whatever library you want or use unreliable transport mechanisms like TCP/IP. So for this reason, RTI provides a FIFO, that means it's a ring buffer, basically with first in, first out, and shared memory access for user kernel space communication. So, I think we now have the basics of real-time programming. We have tasks, we have mailboxes, message queues, data which can be sent from one task to another. We have the semaphores, which we use to control the data communication, to control reaction and reservation on external devices. So, sounds easy, but there are some more obstacles. We have enough of the API to do something useful, but there are obstacles. And one of the typical obstacles you will have to face is priority inversion. And usually a real-time task never gives time to a lower priority task if there's a higher priority task ready, so waiting for execution. So basically priority inversion should never happen. But if in this example you see there is a resource and task 2 takes this resource. Then there is some periodic event of another real-time task. And task 1, which has a higher priority, is executed at around 6. But task 1 needs a resource currently reserved from task 2, and therefore it must block and let task 2 finish. And you see that the area of priority inversion, there are lower priority tasks being executed of the real-time kernel because the higher priority task cannot get this resource. So usually priority inversion is something you get when you're making design flaws, like messing around with resources used by different tasks. There is an example, actually, a very nice example. A tank had some kind of priority that the real-time control software of the tank had some typical example of priority inversion. And the there was some debug output, and the first of the, how you call these things on a tank where it's moving. I mean the chain, yeah. The chain is connected to two engines, front and rear, and the two engines, of course, must run synchronized. And in case of the tank, the chain broke because the engines were running out of sync, because one of the engine was starting, then the other engine, of course, should start before the deadline is reached. And the first engine was writing something to the screen. And exactly at this time, there was a periodic event where at the screen there's written the time of the day and some temperature stuff. And actually the screen functions were very bad written. So the screen task was actually crashing and didn't give back one semaphore. I mean, waiting. The task which was responsible for displaying the time and the current temperature did crash. Therefore, it didn't give back the resource, the semaphore of the screen, and therefore the second engine couldn't start because it couldn't get the screen, so it blocked and the chain simple fall in small parts. So this was very complicated to find, because at first they had no idea what happened, and then they figured out, well, every time there is something in movement and there is this temperature display, something bad happens. And this is called priority inversion. So priority inversion is bad, but it's a design flaw, and you should avoid it quite easy. So another pitfall before I finish is typical deadlock. You know the philosophers problem? You have 4 philosophers, and left of you is a fork, right of you is a spoon. And yeah, you look, if it's something left to you, you take it. And then you look, if it's something right to you, you take it. If not, you wait until it's there. If all 4 philosophers make this, well, they won't eat anything. So the task block because of mutual reservation of resources. Again, system design. You can avoid this, but for instance, in this case, you must have a look, how can we solve this with one semaphore? You have 2 semaphores here for each philosopher. I mean, you have 4 semaphores. For each fork and spoon, you have 1 semaphore. But you could solve this with 2 semaphores. Yeah, and here's the explanation why time-triggered systems sometimes make sense. Because in high-load situations, there is something called interrupt storm. And of course, every interrupt takes a little bit of time. And if you have, for a certain event, tons of interrupt, you have something like an interrupt storm, and this could lead to situations where nothing goes on at this point because the system just serves acknowledging interrupts. You can fix this if you just use time-triggered slots and then look, oh yeah, okay, my one IO resource was just behaving like wild. Okay, well, forget about it and look at the other things. So time triggered has usually you give away a little bit of performance, but you can avoid high load scenarios. Okay, as I have begun my talk a little bit later, I must skip the last part. But of course, what is in security situations where real time is used in cars or in aeroplanes, you have some additional protection, and this also involves that the system is checking if everything is really in time, within the deadline. I mean, because when we are talking about the deadline, it should never occur, but in case of a car or in case of an aeroplane, it's still good to verify this. So you have some additional timestamps on each message. You have additional timestamps on each task to check if it's in between the deadline or not. The tasks, of course, are separated from each other. Most of the time in real time, especially Artel Linux, you're all in kernel space. I mean, that's a lot of fun, but you could do to other tasks whatever you want, and in case of an aeroplane, it won't be that good idea. So they have additional protection features, and yeah, fly-by-wire is one of these typical examples which we can use for additional protection. Also, in this case, you always use fixed time slices. You trash everything about interrupts. You don't need it. You need fixed schedules. And if you want to do something in real time, probably you could start using Artel Linux and getting one of these shiny digital television receiver cards and play a little bit around, because you could possibly attack the encryption of the television broadcast with a real-time task. Everything else would fail, of course. Probably you will fail too, but if you use real-time, you have at least a chance to react to the decoder card within the time limit, and so the show goes on and you have an additional chance to decode it. So real-time is more or less in many devices you have at home. Real-time is very common in your electronic devices all over, and it's not that hard to use. But yeah, remember, real-time means to react within not reaching the deadline. So to be real-time in this talk, I must finish right now.